And it looks like we are good to go.
Okay. All right. So we'll open the proceedings with welcoming each other. We do apologise for those who have just come on stream that we're a little later starting than anticipated, but that's just the joys of technology in the 21st century. So the process is pretty simple. I'd really like to open with our Commission karakia. Then we'll go through some introductions from the Commission's side, and then we'll pass over to you, the Southland Regional Council, to carry out your introductions, and then we'll go into the formalities of you making your observations and then listening through to submitters. So I'll just open firstly with our Commission karakia. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. Kihi aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he heihu, tihei Māori ora.
Māori ora.
So just to get things underway, we'll introduce the three commissioners who are hearing today. I'm going to start with Commissioner Bull through to Commissioner Bigham and then myself. So we'll just do that to get the introductions underway. Commissioner Bull. Just get these, and unmute. Not yet, unmute. Take your time, don't panic. There we go.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Thank you. My name is Gwen Bull. I've been involved in local government for many years in various roles. I was chair of the Auckland Regional Council and involved in the Commission when we did the reorganisation of Auckland. That'll do for me.
Well done, Gwen. Very modest. Commissioner Bigham.
O tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi nui, he uri tēnei o Taranaki Manga o ngā ruehine me te Atiawa. I'm Bonita Bigham from Taranaki e ngā ruehine in Te Atiawa iwi. I am a 5th term elected member, 3 as a district councillor with South Taranaki District Council, 1 as a community board member in South Taranaki, and this term I am Taranaki Regional Council's Māori ward councillor. Also been involved with local government New Zealand at various levels, sitting on National Council and leading Te Maruata, which is the national collective of Māori in local government. So thank you for allowing us to be with you today.
And my name's Brendan Duffy, the chair of the Commission. Probably been around too long for some people's minds. Seven elections in local government, former mayor of the Horowhenua District Council for 12 years, spent a fair amount of time on National Council, rural provincial, and had a term as the chair of a DHB, and now having this role on the Commission for the last, been on the Commission about 8 years. So that's our background in terms of our involvement with local government. Just like to pass through to the team from the Commission who work in the back room doing all the really hard work and making the commissioners look better than maybe they are sometimes. So can we just go through, Linda, you're the author of this report, so we'll start with you through to EJ and then over to Mima.
Tēnā koutou o te rā, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Linda Canton. I'm a senior advisor with the Commission. EJ.
Tēnā koutou, ko EJ Ruthven tōku ingoa. I'm also a senior advisor with the Commission and delighted to be here today.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Greer. I'm a project administrator at the Local Government Commission. I will be talking to the appellants throughout just to get them online and things. So if you see me on my phone, that's what I'm up to. Thank you.
Brilliant. So that's our side of the table. So we'll pass over to you, Chair Nicole, for your introductions, and then we'll carry on from there.
Kia ora, Brendan. I'm Nicol Horrell, Chairman of Environment Southland. With me today is our CEO, Wilma Faulkner, and also Dave Gibbs.
Kia ora. Morena.
We should really get the intro from the election services team.
Kia ora tātou, Dale Ofsowski and Ben Rosa from Election Services. Electoral officer for many councils across New Zealand, and also have been assisting Environment Southland as a consultant with their rep review.
Brilliant. Thank you. So essentially, we've read all the papers, obviously. We've got the observations that you have made. It's important now for you to summarise. There may be some questions as we go through, or at the end, we'll just see where we land. And then once we've taken your observations from your perspective, then we'll go through and we'll hear from the appellants. For the appellants that are online, I'm sorry we are a little bit late. But I'm sure you understand, and we'll get through this as practical and as efficiently as we can. So, Nicole, I'll go back for your observations.
Thank you, Brendan. And at the start of this process, I guess. Pardon?
Sorry, Emma. Sorry, just to butt in. Emma, are you able to please share the presentation for us?
Yeah, I'll just share now.
One other observation while Emma's doing that, if our heads are down, it's because we're taking notes rather than falling asleep. So don't think that we're not interested in not listening. That's one of the challenges of an online process. Okay, go back to you guys.
All good. So have you actually seen this presentation or not up till now? Because I can just summarise some of the information that's there. So there's the first page, which basically shows the current constituencies, and that was the proposal we went out with. Obviously, it has there's 2 or 3 areas that don't comply there. So you've got the Invercargill Rekiora, which is underrepresented by about 9,700 people. We have
Maybe ask it to the next slide.
Go to the next. Yeah, perhaps go to the next slide. Okay, that's probably a little bit clearer. So that shows we've got Fjordland, which we've always felt is quite a defined community of interest, which obviously is well outside the plus or minus 10%. Invercargill, as you can see there, currently is 12.6% over. Southern is 17.74 below. Western is within the 10%. So I guess at the start of this process, I guess some of the conversation was that next time around there's going to be some major changes. We're expecting population growth in the urban areas, which would probably require a pretty full change. The other thing is we've done reasonable amount of preliminary feedback, as you'll see there on the screen there. And out of that, there was certainly ICC pointed out that they were probably underrepresented, but at that stage they were sort of saying we're not going to dive the ditch on the issue. So having done that, we actually went out, had the conversation, and that initial meeting really decided, let's go with the status quo and see what the public make of it, because there had been no strong calls for change. So we thought that we would go out with the status quo. We felt the numbers worked pretty well, even though there was some things that sit outside the plus or minus 10%, and basically see what we got in submissions. I guess in hindsight, we didn't have much scope to change, because 52,000 ratepayers, 18 submissions, which were pretty evenly split on status quo or wanting change. And I guess the Commission has the power to make changes. The scope was probably not there to pick up on some of the submitters' concerns. The Rekiora situation, they actually submitted wanting to join Western, which doesn't seem to really fit the community of interest. Had we had the ability to perhaps put it into Southern and possibly even Bluff. That would have seemed to have been a more logical route, but because of the limited submissions, our hands were pretty much tied on some of the stuff. Obviously, wherever possible, we've tried to stick to the territorial boundaries. There was some small change. The Southland District had consulted with constituents. We also sent letters to all those people to get feedback. But I guess, sort of things are reasonably rigid. We try and do the communities of interest, the fair representation, and wherever possible, trying to stick to territorial boundaries because of the confusion it causes when people go into a ballot box and you've got different constituencies. So I guess that's pretty much where we landed on that position.
2 forwards there, the bottom page. No, you're there. Previous page. Previous page.
Previous page. So after discussion, the option 1, we actually did have about 8 options to look at. We did land on the status quo. So since then, of course, we've had 2 submitters that will be online here today who have made their points. I mean, Lloyd McCallum's main point really was that if you had single constituencies, people were reluctant to challenge a sitting member. Had he had a more flexible submission, we probably would have looked at that. But we felt that combining 6 constituencies probably would have breached the communities of interest, because there'll be no guarantee that if people just voting for 6 that you would have got that sort of representation. Personally, I'd quite like to see them all at 2, but we didn't have that ability. So that would at least give people the opportunity to stand when it wouldn't be a single, but that wasn't an option that was on the table for us. So the 9 options are all up there. Adding a councillor for Invercargill, that would actually be the least disruptive if that was the way the commission went in the end. But I guess sometimes less is more. Adding another councillor around the table doesn't necessarily add value when you've got a reasonably tight constituency with 6 constituents for the Invercargill area. Rakiura is a bit of an outlier. I mean, it's actually within the Southland District, but for some number of years it has been added to that Invercargill block. And I guess we've listened to the submissions where they feel they don't have a individual member that looks after their needs. Obviously, that could well be addressed in the next term, and actually have a nominated person. They also suggested, as I mentioned before, sort of being added to the Western constituency, which doesn't sort of seem to be the communities of interest. I mean, most of the transport is Bluff to Stewart Island or by air to Invercargill. So I guess that's one of the reasons we didn't go with that particular option. And the next one is actually amalgamating, and it should actually have Western on there too. That was actually amalgamating the rest of Southland into another 6 candidate constituency. And as I mentioned before, our concern was that probably wouldn't meet the communities of interest sort of threshold. Combining Western and Fiordland constituencies, I guess to balance things up, you would have to have quite a lot of actual boundary changes to get your numbers to actually line up. And the other interesting one was actually include Stewart Island. Again, that would mean considerable boundary changes that wouldn't line up with the territorials. Next slide, which is Okay, so yeah, finally the council has considered those non-options and agreed to retain the initial proposal on the basis that we felt the 12 councillors is actually appropriate for the geography and population size of the region. I mean, we do have a massive coastline, sparsely populated areas. And there's a bit of talk about urban rural, but the reality is that probably 90% of the people live in an urban place. You've got the Tianas that are growing, you've got the Wintons, the Gore, Matara, and other small hamlets. So it's more, I guess, about trying to give a voice to those communities as much as possible. And there was a debate as to whether adding another councillor to the Invercargill area would actually improve things or not. And I think about 8 councillors voted up for option 1, and there was 2, I think, voted for the 13, and I think we had 1 councillor voted for option 8, I think, which was probably the combining the Fieldland and Rekiora and Western. So I guess in the end of the day, it comes down to effective representation, fair representation, and obviously we've got some aberrations there that don't quite hit that fair rule. But I guess communities of interest, I guess, to me, has always been the strongest driver. So really, I guess, we did come down to the options. It was either the status quo of 12 constituencies, go to 13, but whether any expression in the room makes a lot of difference when you've got quite a compact area, that was debatable. And the other would be to do a 5, 6, 11. But again, that means quite a lot of boundary changes. So that was probably why we landed where we did.
Thanks.
So I think is there anything that I've missed that we need to be passing on to the Commission at this stage?
I think can we go back to the full screen now, just to take the slides off? Can we sorry, Wilma?
So I was going to ask you, Brendan, has everybody that's on the screen got the PowerPoint presentation, or have available to them apart from just having seen it on the shared screen? So it has all the numbers in it and the chairman's points.
We've got Emma.
Through to everyone now. They don't have the specific presentation, but they do have your full.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just as long as all those numbers and the rationales there in front of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Can we just can we go back to this question of the numbers in terms of representation? Help me to understand. We get the sense that you feel if there's an additional representative, it compromises the structure. I'm really struggling to understand what's the issue with an additional person. How does it affect representation negatively? Can you help us to explain how you get that position, or have we interpreted that position accurately?
Well, I guess that would be the cleanest way of making a change, would be to add another. So you'd have 13, which is obviously doable, and it's within the 14 that we could have. And I guess the argument is, does that actually improve effective representation? Obviously, this is a decision you could make. It doesn't mean you mess up boundary things by changing everything around. So if there's a change from the status quo, to me that would be the most obvious change. It still probably doesn't fully deal with the Rekiora situation, which is a small island off the coast, and they feel they're underrepresented at the moment, or not represented. But I guess that's another issue, I guess. Yeah.
Is there a rural-urban split in the way representation is perceived in the region. Help us to understand that.
Yeah.
We're getting the sense that rural elected representatives vote specifically in rural related activities and urban. Help us to understand what actually goes on.
I mean, you've got, some groups, Federated Farmers, for instance, would look that way. But, I mean, Southland is probably the most connected province in New Zealand. The entire, 70% of our production is, primarily comes from, dairying, from everything else. So if the rural area is not doing well, neither do the town. So personally, I don't think that's really an issue, but you do get some groups who have submitted who were concerned about that. But I think that is a minority view, really. I mean,
I suppose, and I just want to qualify that I'm not specifically targeting just rural when I made that observation. It's just as and fellow commissioners will ask questions as well, but as I read the submission, it just seems to be a perception that councillors are voting, or there's a perception that councillors will vote specifically in relation to their constituents from which they were elected, rather than the broader responsibility of an elected member, which is to look right across the region in its considering. Can you help us to get a sense around, have we read that right or not?
No, I think that's more coming from some sectors of the public. I mean, we all take an oath to do the best for Southland, and you may come in representing a particular constituency, but once you've taken your oath, I've always taken my oath very seriously that we are there to represent all the people of the province. So to me, that is not a big issue. People would argue that a lot of our work is in the rural area, and because it's sparsely populated, they would argue that maybe the representation should be slightly broader there, so that they actually have representation. The city's a more compact area, and to be frank, a lot of the city people wonder what we do. Okay, you've got air quality is one that affects them to a certain extent, but most of the other issues, wastewater, they look to the territorial rather than we're in the rural area. We're dealing with water quality issues on a catchment basis, and I guess we've had quite an increase in the number of little catchment groups, 37 of them across the province now, who are basically saying this is our place, we want to be involved in the future. So I guess that is possibly a factor that comes into it, but at the end of the day, we're supposed to be all here to represent the province.
Yeah. I'll just go to fellow commissioners just to check in for questions.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bigham.
Kia ora. Thank you for that presentation. That was really helpful. One of my first questions was the one that you've already answered for Brendan around the perceived rural-urban divide. So that was really helpful. Thanks for that. I just wondered if you had the opportunity to have any kind of feedback from, is it Te Ao Marama, the Runanga Collective, or any indication what their thoughts around the review might look like?
Yes, I think that obviously the conversations were had, and we have a very good relationship with Te Ao Marama in the south, and they did support the status quo. Okay,
thank you.
Commissioner Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just following on from Mr. Chair. I still don't quite understand how an increase in councillors will compromise effective representation.
Well, I'm sure it wouldn't. But yeah, I guess sometimes less is more. It means you've got a few more people around the table. But no, there's no reason why it should compromise representation at all. But I know other regional councils who got a bigger population, but they may only have 8 or 9 councillors. So it's just the numbers don't necessarily give you better decisions, but there's absolutely no reason why one more councillor is going to compromise governance in any way, shape, or form, as far as I'm concerned.
So why did you say that?
Well, I guess the thing is, will they make better decisions than having 12 around the room? It's debatable. There is of course a bit more expense, and we're not allowed to consider the pool, but we struggle in regional councils to actually attract quality people, and they do look at remuneration. I know we can't take that into consideration. That's a different argument, but some would argue, and have argued in the past, you should have less, and they would have a more attractive salary to get the right people to stand. But that's probably a different debate to actual representation.
Thank you.
Can I, so we read the submission that's come through. You can get that sense of why we're struggling a little bit with some of the observations made in your decision-making process. I'm just going to move on then to the catchment liaison committees. Can you help us to understand what they do? And what they and their level of contribution to this final decision making, please.
Well, then you've got the catchment liaison committees on each of the rivers, but they give us feedback on the budgets of what's spent on their catchments. But they are a committee of council, so they don't have a direct say. But the other group that have now come are wider than that. They're people across the whole catchment. So that the liaison groups, and we're trying to widen them out, are different from these catchment 37 catchment groups that we now have across the province. And that's the broader population who really want to have a say in improving the environment, improving water quality, whereas the liaison groups have been I guess, dominated by people who are on the riverbank, and that really goes back to building of flood banks, paying them off, and that sort of thing. So we'd like to actually see them combined, because we're trying to look at whole catchment now, which includes the people on the hills rather than just the people at the bottom of the catchments.
Right.
Do those liaison groups have a vote on council?
No.
Okay.
We'll bring them into meetings, and we're going through a process of actually trying to change our. We've had historical rating takes on those areas that are well outdated. So we've had quite a conversation with them, but at the end of the day, the 12 councillors and our iwi reps might make those decisions at committees. But at the end of the day, at full council, 12 councillors make those decisions.
Okay.
Brendan,
keep going, commissioners.
Yeah,
Sorry.
if I may too, sorry. There's this really strong perception coming through in the submissions that that Invercargill Rakiura has not been heard, is underrepresented, etc., which is the crux of why we're here today. So regardless of the outcome of the decision, there's obviously, to me, what seems obvious to me, that there's some kind of fracture in what they perceive to be the communication lines or the effectiveness, what I think might even be a breakdown of a relationship of some sort. How might that be mitigated regardless of the outcome? Because either way, there will be people who aren't quite fully satisfied with what we decide. So what sort of things are in place to help build that? Is that what you're relying on the catchment groups to sort of overcome?
No, I guess the final submission from ICC was probably a bit stronger than we'd had in the preliminary conversations. And I'm not sure if they have done it. I've seen no evidence that they've actually gone and talked to the constituents. And I'm not sure that there's even been a council endorsement of that. There may be, but I haven't seen actually evidence of that.
So no, but it was a discussion at council last week in the paper in relation to how we might actually address this matter, if you recall.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry.
Dave, you
Yeah.
want to add?
Yeah. So as part of the conversations and what was recorded was that council would acknowledge what Stewart Island Rakiura had submitted. We know the submitters for Rakiura and Invercargill, and chose to explore an informal route of engaging with and enhancing that link with Stewart Island Rakiura ratepayers and enabling their voices to be heard. So there has been work in the background by staff around what that could look like and the structure of that, and that's just going through channels at the moment around what that could look like, and then before it's taken to council.
That's good to hear, because regardless, as I said, of what this process outcome is, there's still those relationships where you all need to do the best for the community. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Brilliant. I think we needed I'll just check with Commissioner Bull.
I'm fine, thank you.
You're fine. Okay, I think we've had a pretty good delve, and thanks for the frankness and the feedback. That I think that's helped us in our deliberations. We should really move on now to hear, if I can just get my page right, hear from the appellants. And Emma, are you able to bring Lloyd in?
Yes, we might actually just move Michael Morris from the Invercargill City Council through first, if that's okay. He just has another commitment to get to. So from right row, Michael, you'll just need to accept the prompt on your screen.
You might want to turn your mic off, Wilma.
Oh, no, sorry. Right at the top.
No, sorry.
Yeah, it's off. You're all good. Good, Michael.
Yeah, kia ora, commissioners. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Is it just you attending here?
Yes, unfortunately, it was a bit of a moving feast to try and coordinate our chief executive to be with me today, and His Worship the Mayor has already given his support for what we're doing. So no, just me today. Just you, okay. And have you been following proceedings? I joined probably about 10 minutes ago. Okay. So I heard some of the conversation with the regional council, which was actually quite heartening to hear. Okay. Essentially, so we're going to hear from you now. You'll summarise the observations you've made in your submission. Commissioners have got the opportunity to ask questions, and there might be some questions that will pass back through to the regional council in their right of reply. So that's kind of like the process that we'll follow. So we're in your hands for the moment. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And firstly, thank you for bringing me on. I greatly appreciate this. Kia ora, everybody. I am Michael Morris, the Manager of Governance and Legal, Deputy Electoral Officer and Legal Counsel at the Invercargill City Council, and I have the task of presenting to you today. I know that you have read our original submission, but also our appeal document, and know that essentially our key argument is that the population numbers in Invercargill Rakiura constituency are such now that there is an imbalance in their representation. It is no longer can be considered fair and effective. And as such, the obvious solution at the moment, and it's essentially, I think it's a short-term issue, is to add an additional councillor to the Invercargill Rakiura constituencies. In our original submission, the other option was obviously to disestablish one of the other constituencies. We absolutely acknowledge that it's not realistic. Fiordland is very much a community of interest and needs a constituency to be represented at the regional council. So that's not something that we are pursuing, but adding another councillor is an easy way to address that imbalance. Essentially, there were sort of three key areas for me to talk about. The first is that communities of interest, that fair and effective representation. At the moment, the city council's view is that that's not it's not fair and effective. I did some rough calculations. We end up with about 3,000 residents of Invercargill who are disenfranchised. And when you calculate those numbers based on the population of the Southland constituency with their one councillor, across, if you add that number across the Invercargill-Rakiura constituency, you end up with about 30,000 people who have an inadequate level of representation when you're looking purely at those numbers. Now, that's not to say that's not right, and because Invercargill is a main urban area, there are ways that we can address that. But when you're looking purely at those numbers, that's actually quite an alarming amount of people who can feel they don't actually have any adequate representation at the regional council. Now, I know all the councils in Southland at the moment are working through what can only be described as quite a trying period in our collective relationships. And I think that's more, to be fair, at a political level than it is at a staff level. I'm very much looking forward to working with my colleagues in the regional council for the upcoming election, for example. But the question about amalgamation has certainly raised its head down here, and I think politically there is some discussion around that. I mean, it's not an immediate issue for this representation review, but it is kind of the elephant in the room for all the councils. So it is that's the council's submission that to achieve that fair and effective representation, you've got to be looking at an additional council to ensure that actually those numbers come down in terms of councillor per amount of people to be represented. And an easy, quick solution is an additional councillor. And I did catch the part where Chairman of the Regional Council was talking about remuneration. I also acknowledge that's not a relevant matter, but I absolutely hear what he is saying on that. Remuneration is important to actually attract quality candidates. And I appreciate that position that puts them in. The second part of our submission really is, if not now, when? And I appreciate that's very much a rhetorical question, Commissioners, but it's also one for the Regional Council. When are these numbers going to be enough, excuse me, that we actually take time to address this imbalance? Invercargill has been sitting at about the plus 12% for the last couple of representation reviews, but the number of people continue to grow in that, and that the numbers of people who are outside of that representation continue to grow. So yeah, urbanisation is not a new trend. It has been going on for quite some time. So it really much is a matter of if it's not now, and that's okay, when will this be addressed? How will this, and then obviously, how will it be addressed? Because the time is coming. And the last point, because I know that there will undoubtedly be some questions, is, and I think I caught Commissioner Bull asking this very question of, I thought the answers were as to the reason, given as to why not adding additional councillor. It didn't actually provide us with any reason. It just said it may compromise fair and effective representation, but there was no rationale as to why it would. And so it was heartening to hear from the Regional Council that it actually wouldn't. But I actually don't have any other reason or rationale for that, why our submission was put to one side. And I noted in the debates there, and the other comments that I could sort of put to it, is that there was a comment that it might skew, that it would skew the representation towards urban rather over rural, or the balance. Our argument back would be quite simply, there's a skew to rural now because there are more people living in the urban areas and they are underrepresented, so that decision making is balanced against the urban population. And so with that, and knowing that you also need to get on to other submitters, I'm happy to leave it there and answer any questions that the commissioners may have.
Thanks, Michael. Look, can I just cut to the chase? How does the current structure manifest itself in a negative manner? In other words, the current number of representatives, tell me how it's not working. I just can't get it. You've got 6 at the moment representing, and you're looking for 7. What's not happening with the 6 that are already there?
So I make obviously no comment on the 6 elected councillors.
No, not
they
the
were elected.
individuals. No, not the individuals. No.
But
what's not happening?
It's simply the council's position on this was council. So the Invercargill City Council represents the largest urban area within regional council. There is obviously a large number of people who are in that area, and when we looked at those numbers, it was very much how are our constituents adequately represented, and ensure that there is those voices included in the regional council decision making.
Yeah.
And when you look at those numbers, they're not. There isn't
what's an example of what's not happening? How's the community being disadvantaged? But other than that number, which I accept, what's not happening?
So look, we're not making an argument around regional council failing to deliver its duties. I will observe that I don't think many people in the city would be able to tell you what the regional council does for them beyond flood banks. And so, but that's not a failing of the council in delivering. It's just probably a failure actually of people not understanding quite our civic arrangement. And the only other example that I would point to, and I know that the regional council ultimately changed from, was their decision relating to changing to capital value for rates. That was obviously going to have a significant and fairly major impact across the city. But during the consultation period, the regional council listened to the feedback, which came across everybody. It wasn't just the city council, it was also rural people and other organisations such as Federated Farmers saying this isn't going to work, and they did listen. But when you look at it from an urban point of view, capital land value, a change plus an additional rates increase was going to be a significant burden across the city, and it was a massive increase of money that the city council had to find for its own regional council rates. Again, this is more of a technical appeal rather than we believe the regional council is failing to listen to urban voters. It was, these numbers are out, how are they going to be addressed? And if not now, as I said, when?
I just got one other question. And I'm not digging too deep, but when I read your submission, there's 2 occasions you use the expression with respect, and I'm thinking, what are you trying to say here?
So generally, with respect is a legal nicety saying they've said this, but we don't agree. It's really nothing more than that. It's I'm a lawyer. That's
yeah. I suspected it might have been. I just needed to hear it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll pass to fellow commissioners. Who's going first?
Gwen Ken.
Commissioner.
No, I'm fine after you.
You're good. Okay, Commissioner Bigham.
Kia ora, Michael. Thank you for your time today, and not wanting to hold you up. I know you've got other appointments as well. The number, the 30,000 people potentially without adequate representation, and I know you talked about not disparaging the work that is done by regional council at all. So the basis that I'm seeing or feeling is that this is, you're putting your hand up on behalf of those people who might not even know what they might be missing out on. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, the City Council sees itself advocating on behalf of its community, and that's essentially what we're doing here.
Okay, cool. So has there been any kind of evidence to back up those fears that the City Council might have? Has there been any rhetoric coming through from members of your community? I know you've said, and I totally agree, because as a regional councillor in Taranaki, many of our constituents have no idea what we do.
Yep.
But just wondering, you know, are you safeguarding too intently or too intensely something that, yeah, I'm. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, I'm just like, are you trying to be the
I think we're being proactive, and we're trying to be the guardians for our community to make sure that actually we understand this stuff. That's our job. Most in the community won't understand it, so look, we are just it's essentially from the council's point of view, and when we have discussed this, both this and the appeal with the council, it's a flag up the pole saying actually something needs to be done about this. We know it doesn't have to be done. It may not have to be done now. The commission may decide that this is okay, but we're signalling actually with these urban trends. Yeah, it's a long-term look.
Great. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for understanding what I was trying to spill out of my head.
That's a helpful observation there, Michael, in terms of what we're trying to analyse. Commissioner Bull, did you have a question?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. So, and the reason I say that it's helpful is that, again, in your submission, you use the word, you know, breach of the 10% threshold. It's kind of like, oh God, you know, they've gone too far. And I presume I want to, no, let me just start that again. I'm keen to make the observation that going beyond the threshold does happen around the country for all sorts of fair and valid reasons, especially in relations to communities of interests, and of course geographical challenges. And let's agree that your end of the island is incredibly large, incredibly diverse. It's got unique little pockets of communities, and there is a challenge around getting that. What everybody wants is a fair and effective representation. But again, the language is I don't know how many times I underlined the word breach that you've observed, but you've helped me because you've made the observation that maybe if not now, but at some time, something needs to be done. And I think that's been the real value of having had this discussion today. So I thank you for that. That's useful.
No, thank you, Commissioner. And look, I absolutely agree. Southland is a spectacular part of the country, but we are geographically challenged, and we have lots of interesting communities. And I also acknowledge immediately that regional councils don't have the advantage that city councils do. We can have a community board to address some of these issues.
Yeah.
The regional council doesn't have that easy option. And I also acknowledge the various submissions from the Rekiura Stewart Island community, and they feel disempowered by being part of the wider Invercargill Rekiura network. So it's a challenge. I absolutely want to acknowledge the immense work that the Environment Southland team have put into it, because having done representation views for the city, I understand what it takes. So this should not be seen in any way a criticism of their work. And I've also actually appreciated the time that I've had to get the city's point across.
Brilliant. Okay. And so out of all of that, the writer reply is going to be rather modest because we haven't fired any questions back through to the regional council. And I think that's a first, actually, in all of the hearings that we've done. I don't think we've ever gone all the way to the end where there's not going to be the need for specific questions to be answered. But that's okay. Every submission we do is different. So Michael, thank you for your time. I know you've got to get away, and appreciate your observations.
No, thank you, Commissioners. Kia ora.
Brilliant.
Kia ora, Michael.
Now, my agenda says we should have had a cup of tea by now, and we haven't. But I'm quite happy to keep going if that works for everybody, because I think we're just about there.
We do have one more appellant.
Of course we do.
waiting.
Yes.
Lloyd.
Of course we do. And thanks for reminding me. Are we ready to go?
I'll just bring in him through as a panelist now. So Lloyd, you'll just need to accept that and we'll turn on your video and sound.
Okay. Welcome, Lloyd.
Hello, is that
Hello,
there?
Lloyd. Welcome.
G'day.
Thank you for hanging out there. I'm sorry about the delay.
Well, it's been interesting listening to it all. So yeah,
Oh, well, free entertainment.
yeah, it is.
Brilliant. So I don't need to give you the rundown on what's happening because you've got it all in hand, and we're very happy to hear your observations based on the submission that you presented through to us.
I'll just summarise a couple of things. I thought that the council, even though they made no changes, would have actually had a more detailed document of how they got to where they got to, and had other options sitting out there they may have considered that some of the submissions may have picked up on, and it may have been easier to change. But I probably have two views on representation. One is, as you've been discussing, is people representing an area. And I can understand the arguments that are up around numbers. But I also have a view of representation around the table. Bit of background. I was a councillor for 9 years and took a role of deputy chairman for 6 years. So I've been there, and this is, I left at the last election. And some of the things that I saw was that the views of the councillors didn't always represent the areas that they come from. So what am I trying to say? The representation around the table is, to me, is a skill set that is needed to run a multi-million-dollar business and to be balanced across all frameworks. And I don't think you've got that. I think that the argument that came up and the response that I got from ES was community of interests. But the argument that every board, every council, everybody that represents or tries to govern is that you actually need skill sets around the table. And the system that you have now is actually two systems side by side. One is that you've got small numbers represented, like Fiordland or Southland, where I represented, or Pokanui. But in Invercargill, you've got this pool. And what I was trying to allocate or to put out to Environment Southland was, if you want the best people to stand, and I want to stand, let's say I want to stand in my ward, but there's a good councillor there, I have to stand outside of my ward, which I'm not known at to the same extent. So my chances of getting on, even though I might have the right skill set, is actually lessened than if I was in a pool and the top 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 came through. So I just make that point that representation around the table, which I would have thought was more important than representation of a community of interest and the skill sets that are needed. Because a council can appoint people to areas. For instance, of the 6 councillors in Invercargill, they could actually appoint someone to look after Stewart Island. Job done. They go over there. But the last time that I remember a councillor going over there, 2 people turned up. So there's a participation as well on the other side. So at the moment, you've actually got people who sit outside of their constituency who live in different areas, but they actually represent Invercargill, for instance. I'm just going to leave it there because I think your questions would be more from my submission. I've made a number of points in there that the other point I would say is that Invercargill actually is unusual because it actually has a body of interest around it now, but the rural sector doesn't have that same body of interest. So I was on the leadership team for the Mayoral Forum, and at the Mayoral Forum we talked about a number of matters that related to Invercargill people that came back through to Environment Southland. Now that's probably not seen by many, but ICC actually has another body. So an example, if I as a farmer go to the Environment Court, I'm charged and it's against me. But in Invercargill, as an individual is not. So the council takes the bearing, not the individual. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Well, the only other thing I'd say is that the only time that I've spoken to councillors is when I've paid the effort. And no councillor has actually come to me. Some of them don't even return my calls. And there's been no public consultation of councillors going out and actually talking about the issues that they're facing. So all we're getting really is press releases. So that's where some of the disconnect is between people who feel disconnected, is that they're not building relationship with the council.
Suppose one of the great ironies is in the purest principles of democracy, it's the people who decide.
Yes.
And the people have decided. They've voted in a democratic way and appointed individuals who they believe will fairly and respectfully and appropriately represent them. And this is the last body that's going to change that structure, as we would all appreciate. Changing from the model that we have at the moment, where you would like to see effectively an at-large model, a broader opportunity. The same people get elected again? I mean, help me to understand.
The issue is that, let's be frank, of the 12 people that are sitting around council, the council workload was done by about 4 or 5. The rest were on there for other agendas and had other reasons.
That's not something that we can.
I know that. I know that. But what I'm saying is that you've got to have not many people sitting around that table are running multi-million-dollar, multi-staff businesses. Be very, very few.
Yeah.
So they don't understand the full dynamics, the full interaction, the full one. You're sitting between the ratepayer and the government. There's a lot of stuff going on, and you have to be agile. You have to be able to consume a huge amount of information to actually make the decisions that you make.
Wouldn't you agree, though, that argument could be across New Zealand and broader? That's why you have, in my view, fantastic management teams with the skills and dexterity to be able to support elected members.
Yes, but not all elected members have the ability to challenge management to their fullest extent.
Okay.
So let's take the extreme. The dairy company had this argument some time ago, and the extreme is that that all the directors come from the same road. Now, are they the best people, or do we go out and get people from different areas to actually be a part of the board or the governing body, but they don't have the skill sets? So they're by popularity, but not necessarily the skill sets that we need to run these multi-complex, diverse businesses, which is a huge, huge ask. So all I'm really saying is that the model to me looks like there's 2 models side by side. Right. It's not a pure model, and your arguments are coming up for and against either side. But to me, the one model should be across the whole region.
Okay, I respect your views. I'll just check with fellow commissioners if there's any points of clarity, any questions. Commissioner Ball, and then Commissioner Bigham.
So how do we overcome the issue that you see?
Well, you either go. I've gone to the extreme of 6 and 6, or you could break it down and go 3, 3, 3. You've got somehow, when 2 people with the right skill set sit side by side, I need to get both of them onto the council table. But some of them are actually locked out because of process, because they're not actually sitting in the right constituency or ward to actually be elected. So you're actually pushing people out who would actually be an asset around the table. So you can play with that model, but the model to me, there's 2 extremes sitting there. You would have to merge it in some way. And I've just said 6 and 6 because that sort of makes sense. But you could go 4 lots of 3 or whatever. It would actually look after some of your because the question that hasn't come up is there somebody on Stewart Island that's able to represent the island and do the travel and do all the paperwork that's involved for the regional council? And I don't know whether there is. There is a confusion out there between Environment Southland and Southland District. People don't know their roles and responsibilities. It's a failure of the system, because everybody really only takes attention when something comes up that affects them as an individual member. So I'm just saying that the model's not right, and that needs some changes. You could say major or subtle changes to get the right people around the table.
Thank you. Commissioner.
Okay, leave it
Commissioner. Okay.
Kia ora. Thank you, Lloyd. Great points and great points for future debate. Unfortunately, we have to work within the confines of what we have in place at the moment. But can I just let you know that these are all conversations I've heard at national level, regional level, and local level as well. So your points are not unfamiliar to me at all. And I'll just make a comment. When I was first elected as a district councillor, I would spend my time in the two major townships in my little ward, 6 months every week. I was at one or the other of those places, and I had one person, one time, come to see me. So I understand the challenges of trying to put yourself out there. I'm just interested in your points around having the best people for the job, as opposed to having representatives from geographical areas. The flip side, could the flip side of what you think is the right thing to do not be that those people who may come on board with those lesser skills have the chance to grow in those skills? Those people who come on board with those lesser skills may be really important key advocates within their community who understand what's going on the ground, who have the wider perspective of also being able to balance that against the needs of the district. I'm not a numbers person. I don't run a multi-million-dollar business, but I still feel like I contribute at that ground level. So is that not a valid option as well, which is obviously the model that we're in now with a geographical spread rather than the skills-based election model?
I've been sitting at regional council at 4:30 at night on the finance committee and not able to hold a quorum. The business end of looking after the business and making sure it's solvent and your interests, investments, and understanding of and scoping investment strategies and looking at long-term budgets was not somebody that lined up at the door to belt it down to get in. They weren't. They would talk about the topical situations around the place, but they wouldn't look after the business. Right. And there's a number of times where we were unable to do business because we didn't have the attendants in the room late in the afternoon trying to keep this thing going. It takes time and commitment, and unless you understand some of the language and the lingo that's around, it's hard to get interested, because you need see, in the regional council sector, the person that actually carries the cans is the CE. The CE is the one that actually has as it were a prison threat over their heads for not running the business. The councillors don't have any liability apart from turning up to meeting and participating, and they vote. But as a director, I have to carry a huge responsibility, quite different than a councillor. What I'm really saying is that if you want to be around this council table, you need to have directorship skills. You need to have an understanding of business to the point that you know when you're being led down the garden path by management, or you don't. If you don't understand something in the finances, you need to be able to put your hand up and say, "I don't understand." But
does everyone need that skill? Because respectfully, I disagree. I think if everyone had that skill, then there might be no one who is got the environmental passion, who has the community passion, who has the cultural passion. So yeah, I'm just looking for, I hear you, because I don't have those skills, but I respectfully wonder if you're wanting to push it so far. But again, as I mentioned before, these are things that are outside of what our ability to adjudicate on.
I think we've had a pretty good go.
Unfortunately.
I think we've
Yeah.
had a pretty good go, and we have different perspectives and different views, and that's what's healthy about a democracy. But I think we should call it quits at that. We've heard from Lloyd, and again, I'm not picking up any particular questions that we need to refer back to Southland Regional for comment. But Lloyd, thanks for those observations, and clearly thanks for your genuine interest in the principles of democracy and what's important in your community. So I do say thank you.
And your past service, Lloyd. Thank you for your past service to the sector.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. It was great.
Good on you. So look, I'm suggesting that we might just take a 5-minute break. I suspect a few people will want to take a wee stop. That's a bit of a pun. I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, let's take 5 minutes. We'll just turn our screens off, but don't go away, Emma. And then we'll come back and then we'll do a wash up, and I think we're done. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So 5 minutes. Let's get back on, and but just turn your screens off for the moment and your audio. You're right there, Gwen. Yeah, okay, we're all good. We're nearly there, team. All right, we're all back. Yep. Emma, we all good? Okay, so look, we're just reconvening now. As I said earlier on, this is probably the first time we haven't had specific questions go back for a right of reply, so you snuck through that one, you guys. But having said that, it would be useful for any closing comments that you may wish to make, having now heard from the appellants and having heard the sorts of questions that we've asked. So as a courtesy, can I just pass back to your chair and just get your observations, or chair and team? So you need to unmute.
Thanks for the opportunity, Brendan, and it's interesting to hear the conversations. There's a lot of things we can't change. Lloyd's argument about more flexibility, all six, I don't think, but actually would actually cover the communities of interest. If he'd asked for 3 of 2. At the time, we probably would have looked at that. So I can understand the argument that people are reluctant to challenge a sitting person, but because it was 6, it was out of scope for us to actually consider that. Listening to the City Council one, I guess it actually comes down to effective representation, and I guess that'll be a decision you guys will deliberate over. We believe 6 is effective. 7 would also be effective. We're not two-phased about that. And the comment was that if not now, when? There was quite a bit of talk about local government reform, and we may well see in the next time that there are different configurations out there. But at this stage, I guess my question is, do 6 urban councillors for that area actually effective or not? I think they are. 7 obviously would be effective as well. But I think we'll review any other comments you'd like to make.
Oh, just to reinforce the chair's comment, that was the discussion with the council. We're looking at the 3 areas to be mindful for, that the council's aware that it is, as Michael said, in breach of the plus or minus 10%. But then they applied the second principle and the third one, is it effective representation? They didn't ask the question in the negative, they asked it in the positive. Is it effective? And their answer to that, I think, was yes. Which is why they voted. The question that the commissioners raised about Rakiura was much discussed, and so there is a program of work now around how to respond to those submissions, because they really were quite clear about wanting to see more representation, and from existing councillors. So that's a matter that can be managed through the way the council manages its relationships. But the council, I think, really were quite clear that they felt that they were effectively representing with 6. So I guess the question is, from your perspective, is, does it need to be 7 to be effective? And also apply the communities of interest. And so the only departure from existing council boundaries was the Rakiura Invercargill boundary, because that really did relate to the ability to connect Rakiura to the mainland at that point and its channels. So I think the council felt that it applied the principles and that it considered them well, but it wasn't responding to, would 7 be, did they have a problem they were fixing with 7, as opposed to, is 6 a problem? And the answer was, they feel they're effective. Yeah, so that's your decision, obviously, and the chair's been clear about it.
Yeah. Can I there's just one point of clarity, and I am going to ask Linda, just if you don't mind. There's a question around, and we didn't bring it up earlier, around the boundary hold on, where am I?
It's just the boundary non-alignment
There.
With the Hokonui and Southern constituency boundary between those two constituencies. There's a point of non-alignment with the district council's ward boundaries. Brendan, and I think you were keen to understand what the community of interest is in the area of non-alignment and why it is better grouped than the Southern constituency rather than the Hokonui constituency.
Yeah, and that was so in the 2019 determination that was highlighted, and just wondering, and I should have asked it earlier, and I'm sorry. Have you had a look at that?
Yes, very much so.
And
yes, we explored that from a staffing perspective to then put forward to council. The work that was done looked at the numbers in terms of the compliance by moving those mesh blocks over to Hokonui. It would further increase the non-compliance in the southern area. Further to that, when it was kind of explored, a lot of the properties and people within those mesh blocks actually did their connection was to Invercargill, services, transport, schools within Invercargill, and the question was really put forward around what is the value add of making that alignment just for the sake of a boundary, really.
Because they'll do what they're going to do anyway, aren't they? Regardless of where a boundary sits, they'll go where they need to go. Right.
So in summary, for the moment, though it was highlighted in 2019, you have had another look at it, and you're still comfortable that that's fair and effective representation. Okay, can I just go back to Linda? Is that enough info for you? And if it's not, say so.
Well, I guess the subsequent question would be, how is that different from the communities at that boundary between Invercargill and Hokonui constituency who are on the western side of that boundary? So the communities who are in Hokonui at the boundary, near the boundary with Invercargill, Rakiura constituency, how are they different or the same? What are the commonalities they might share with that area of non-alignment? Because presumably they too share an orientation towards Invercargill.
Well, I think we probably looked at it was going to make that ward even smaller and more non-complying. Hokonui, I guess, its main urban centre is Winton, whereas, as has been mentioned, the people in that area would look more to Invercargill for schooling or for services. So we couldn't actually see any great benefit in shifting it just because, in that case, because the territorial boundary had changed. Normally we try to do it as close as possible, but that was going to make a ward that's already under the 10% even worse. So that was the balancing act, was community of interest and the numbers, I guess.
Okay. Right. I think now just bear with me, because I want to make very, very sure we haven't missed anything. So from officials, have we covered off the substantive questioning that's necessary and appropriate for us to then go through our decision making? You're happy, Linda? Okay. Yep. Okay. Right. I get the sense then that that we're done. We'll go away now and work through our deliberation protocols, and our decision will come out in due course. You'll appreciate there's a hell of a workload at the moment, so I'm not going to commit to a date as to when that comes out, but the team have got it in hand, and as efficiently and as rapidly as we can, we'll get that decision through. Sure, Ben. Yep.
Apologies. Just putting out there that in regard to the non-alignment conversation, there was some analysis that was done, and I just wondered if Linda, you're interested in receiving that, or we have a conversation to make sure that you have got that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's really, really important that we've got as much documentation as practical. So yes, that's useful, Ben. If that can go through, that will be helpful. Right. So can I just say thanks very much for the effort and energy. I know the technology challenged at the start, but it certainly worked all right after that. So there's no real issues there. And I think we've had a free and frank, fair discussion where appellants have had the opportunity, and you as the representatives for the regional council have given a fair and respectful perspective. So we really, really do want to say thank you and appreciate the time that you've set aside. In conclusion, the Commission would like to close with our karakia, and then we can go and enjoy the rest of our day. So I'll just close with our karakia. Unahia, unahia, unahia i te uru tapanui, kia wātia, ki mama te tenako. Te tinana te wairoa e te arotakatu, koera e rongo. Whakarea ake ki runga, kia wātia, oira kia wātia.